Amen.
Well, on the front of Darwin's book, he has this thing that we're going to talk about tonight. And this is that's kind of an early one. Here's another early one. And we're going to kind of go through that. If you if you put evolution in on your computer, they won't show this anymore. Now, they did a few years back. In fact, it was in textbooks. It was what we taught our children in grade school. And there's kind of 4 stages: Lucy, Heidelberg man, Nebraska man, Piltdown man, and Peking man. But I thought I'd go through those. Just Lucy is the one that's talked about maybe the most still. Lucy was found by Donald Johanson in Ethiopia in 1974, near the village of Hadar. And this is what he found, and that's kind of unusual to find that much. You know, that's a pretty good piece of fossil of, so it was it got people really excited. By the way, it's named after a Beatles tune that they were playing at the campsite when they found it.
The sky was done. That's right.
Anybody want to sing a few bars?
Yeah. Lucy in the sky. No, that was Judy in the sky.
Here's a picture of Donald. Here's a picture of Lucy. Now, of course, that's just a made-up picture, but it was in the museum, still is. Isn't she cute? And this was kind of what we believe, that Lucy evolved in the humans. She was called, her official name is Australopithecines. And they thought she was the first one maybe to walk upright, but they didn't have her feet. If you notice the fossils back there with feet, this is what they had. And from that, they decided that maybe she walked upright, but she didn't. She walked on her knuckles, kind of, you know, you've seen orangutans walk and chimpanzees walk.
Could you
We're going too fast?
hold those? I read those, and I always miss the last 2 lines at the bottom.
Well, I'm just afraid that Kansas is getting bored.
Oh, okay. That's all right.
Is that the one that's up there longer than that?
Just a minute.
So the fingers and toes, they got an even more complete skeleton, and the fingers and toes, they knew that they walked on their ankles and on their knuckles, and the feet were more for living in trees and walking on the ground. And that's kind of what this shows. They didn't have that originally. So she wasn't really bipedal, or in other words, walking upright, but she's more, you know, how monkeys walk. And she wasn't any different than the monkeys we have today as the way she walked. Now, the problems with Lucy being an actual human ancestor came up as they discovered more bones like hers. Her brain's too small, she's only 3 foot tall. The foot bones aren't for walking upright, they're for dwelling in trees. So she's just an ape, probably more like a chimpanzee. That's what she looked like in the picture. To me, is just a chimpanzee, and no closer to human than any of the chimpanzee and apes that we have now. So she's not really a... So, and now they know that they're just not any closer to humans than the apes we have today. And it's certainly not a predecessor or a transitional animal from apes to humans. Now, again, this was presented as fact for years. It was in textbooks. It was on, you know, encyclopedias, and they talk about. In fact, if you look at, if you just put in human evolution in the Wikipedia now, it sounds like it's fact, but it's far from fact. And everybody, pretty much, that's an expert says it's not a fact that there's human predecessors between apes, or transitional fossils between apes and humans. So they even, we showed the picture where they had facial features for Lucy, but they're not really true. And we don't know that Lucy used tools now or could use fire. In the books, it said Lucy did all those things, but no, I don't think so. So let's go to Heidelberg Man next, okay? That was the second one in the early evolutionary cascade that they taught for years. Heidelberg Man.
Hey, relative good.
It was the whole thing was made up or imagined from a jawbone. There's a Heidelberg Man jawbone and a human jawbone. See, this one's bigger. It's a lot bigger. So it was found by Daniel Hartman. It was very much like a human, but bigger and tougher. So the guy we just talked about found Lucy. He said, you probably shouldn't give it a distinct species name. He thought that the one who found it, no, it was just a man. But in spite of the jawbone's strong similarity to human jawbone, Hartman decided to give it its own name and species and made him famous all over the world. Everybody heard of him. He got money and he got fame because he said this is a humanoid, human predecessor, or something on the way of evolution of man. And it made all the people who believe in evolution real happy that he found this. Well, all it is a big jawbone. And don't you think Goliath had a big jawbone?
Oh, yeah.
Some of you remember Andre the Giant. He was kind of famous. He did movies and all sorts of stuff. He kind of talked a little funny.
Went to school in
We're getting This is Goliath, the picture of Goliath. But here's my favorite, because I got to know this guy.
Oh.
He played center on the NOC. You remember Paul White? He was a nice guy. He'd come in. I don't remember what he was in for, cut himself or something. And we talked for close to an hour. He said he had a full football scholarship to Clemson, but he wanted to play basketball because he's 7 foot tall. He could have been in the NFL, I suppose. But he wasn't real quick and couldn't shoot very well. But he was a neat guy. And he went on and played basketball at Wichita State for 2 years after he left. And then he became a professional wrestler. And he made a lot of money professional wrestling, whatever that is. I'm not sure whether that's a sport or an entertainment. But
Yeah.
he was called Big Show. And he weighed 450, especially when he wrestled. And there's another picture. Now, I say that, he had a big jawbone. If you found his fossil, you'd say, wow, this guy's all different. Well, he was just a human with a big jawbone, so he was big all over. His hands were huge.
Yeah.
I stick my hand in, go about that far. And they were thick, too. Okay, so he was just a normal, Heidelberg Man was just a human. It had a large jaw. The next one that was in the books for years was Nebraska Man. It's probably the worst of all of them. Nebraska Man was even had his own species, which means ape of the Western world. It was heralded as the first higher primate of North America. And it was in like textbooks for 40 years. And even after it was proven to be not that, people keep saying it still appears, textbooks are, what are they, 5 years behind? Sometimes, even if they're going to change it, they don't even change it quick. So, Harold Cook had in his possession a tooth. And he'd been found 4 years early, 1980, in Nebraska, which is the white guy's name. He didn't get it until 1922. But anyway, Dr. Osborne didn't get it until 1922, and they came to the conclusion, along with Dr. William D. Matthew, that it belonged to an anthropoid ape. Then they passed on to William Gregory, Dr. Hyatt, Milo Hellman, who agreed that the tooth had to belong to an ape. And this ape was more closely related to humans than to other apes. So it's halfway there, over halfway there.
All
from
based
ape to
upon
man.
a tooth, eh?
All out of the tooth,
Yes.
yeah. Now, this is a true story, and they're still doing this stuff. There's the tooth. You think you can construct what Nebraska man looks like and acts like from this tooth? And they had they had an article that was actually published in Science announcing the discovery of a man-like ape in North America. So here's what he looked like. Nebraska man.
Well, of course.
They got all that from a tooth. Actually, there's two of them there.
I think I've seen him.
He was in Nebraska.
Somebody I know. So they continued to work on this, and they went out and dug around and tried to figure out some more. Then they found some more parts of the skeleton. And they decided that after they got more parts of the skeleton with the same kind of teeth, that they'd been wrong. The tooth didn't belong to an ape or a man, but to a peccary, which is basically a pig. And the excuse they gave was the tooth had been weathered.
Oh, wow, yeah, that's good.
For a while. Well, yeah.
One day.
Yeah.
So they did retract it in the journal Science in 27. Okay? So it was not this guy. This is not what that tooth came from. It came from this, which is basically a pig.
There you go.
There's another picture of where it came from. That's Nebraska, Maine. And Robert was already doing this. He beat me to the joke. I found it! I found the missing link! The owner of this tooth was ape-like, tall, walked erect, had deep-set eyes and projecting eyebrows. Let me see that, the other guy says. No, I'd say, I don't know if you know something, there's a tooth missing in the pig. The other guy says, no, I'd say the owner of this short, walks on all four hoofs, has big ears, and long, mobile snout and curly tail. So, again, that was pretty bad. Textbooks in the schools of the United States for years. In fact, some people will still pull this up and show this as proof that man involved. The next one's even worse.
There we go.
Piltdown man. Piltdown. Now this Charles Dawson is not someone you want to believe, okay? He found it, and he really didn't find it. A worker in the Piltdown gravel pit found a fragment of the skull, but thought it was a coconut. So he told finally Dawson about it. Maybe that wasn't a coconut, it was a skull. So Dawson found further fragments of the skull and took them to the Arthur Smith Woodard at the British Museum. And he was interested, so they went back and discovered more skull fragments and half of a lower jawbone. So the skull, which was unearthed 4 years earlier, 1908, was the only thing that was discovered in situ. All the other pieces were found in the gravel pit spoil heaps. So in other words, they'd been dug out and thrown away. So they went through the trash, basically, and found this. So Woodard put them all together and decided that it was very similar to a modern human, except for the very back of the head, and for the brain side, it was only 2/3 as big. He said there was two human-like molar teeth. Otherwise, the jaw was a lot like a chimpanzee. So they constructed the whole skull together, and Woodward thought that this was an evolutionary missing link between apes and man. So here's kind of what they had. And a little bit of human skull there, and this is all plaster. little bit of skull there, and some teeth, some plaster, the jaw. But they kind of put it together. This is what they thought the skull looked like. And so they came up with an image, and it was in textbooks and in an encyclopedia for years. This is what he looked like. Piltdown man. Well, there's some people who started questioning whether this was true. And in 1953, which is a long time later, remember we talked about 1918, 1922. It was a complete hoax. It had a human skull from a few years back, a 500-year lower jaw of an orangutan, and a chimpanzee. And again, you can see that. It was just in a trash heap where they put a whole bunch of stuff. You know, it wasn't like they found the whole thing all together. They went to the trash heap, picked up different parts, and said they came from the same place. Well, they sort of came from the same place, but not exactly. Not the same fossil. And it was worse than that. It was worse than just being. They actually were trying to trick people because they changed the appearance of apes by staining the bones. And you can see file marks on the teeth. So it would look more like a human tooth. So here's kind of they found it in 1908, but a scientist didn't get it until 1912, and then he and a couple other guys started digging in that area, looking for it. You find all sorts of stuff there. So they broke the news within the year to the popular press, and they officially presented it as Piltdown Man. And 13 years later, someone said, I think this is a mistake, but they ignored it. And then they thought, well, we ought to test it. So they didn't test it, though, for a long time, 6 years later, showed it was a hoax. And then it took until 50 years after that before they found out that Charles Dawson's career in fakes was exposed. He did a lot of those. So don't believe what you hear from Charles Dawson. So that's Lucy, Heidelberg Man, Nebraska Man, Piltdown Man, and Peking Man. Now, Peking Man doesn't make you quite as sick, but it's not a predecessor of chance. So it was Peking because when it was discovered in the 1920s, Beijing was called Peking. Remember, when I was in high school, we talked about the capital of China was Peking. Beijing. I probably won't say either one quite right. So this is a fossil proof of transitional creatures on the road to modern man and proof of human evolution. And they dated the Peking man fossils from somewhere between 300,000 BC and 800,000 BC. No, 300,000, 800,000 years ago. So there's a skull and there's a rendition. Well, they went back to the same site. A few years later, they found humans were in the same area exactly. So Peking man existed at the same time modern humans did, who they weren't supposed to be there. Remember, supposed to be 300,000 to 800,000. Modern humans were supposed to come from way after that. So that pretty much by itself proved that he wasn't a predecessor. He was just a human. And still in 2011, mini evolution, in fact, after that, they still, in fact, today, they still point to him as proof of evolution. But it's not science, it's just religion. It's just faith. And then this is interesting. In 1941, all the Peking man original fossils, they lost them. It's a head scratcher. You know, we're talking about millions of dollars here, but again, this is in China, and China doesn't really have the same ethics we do. So they're probably, anyway, you can make what you want of that, but there are no Peking fossils anymore.
They got some. They were dealing with the Japanese at that time as well. That probably complicated things.
Yeah. So because they disproved all of those, when you get on websites and read about human evolution, it's all changed. They won't claim anything as a predecessor. They say apes and man and all these other things came from a common evolutionary father way back, and they've changed the way they talk about it. But I kind of skipped ahead when I said that. This is not really important to read, Bill.
Hang on.
Okay.
I've got 2 lines left. Thank you.
By the way, this one here, I had a whole bunch of information on it, and I'm not going to go because I didn't know if we get through the more important stuff. So if we get through real quick, we could go. I got like 10, 12 slides on that one. Paranthropus boisei.
It may not be very important, but it's convincing, very convincing.
So this is a little bit after the old one that we saw, the yellow one. This is kind of what they went to next. So most people don't use this anymore. I think it's still in some textbooks, but modern scientists don't really believe this. And I'm not going to go through all of this. Is basically, I'm going to go through the last 2 here. Because you've heard of them.
Yeah.
Neanderthal man and Cro-Magnon man. Now, Neanderthal is the most famous. In fact, that's what we call each other when we think you're acting like you're not quite civilized. You call them a Neanderthal. I've heard a few football players called Neanderthals. Neanderthals had large and thick skulls. They're also lower and elongated. They were pretty short. Their brain was actually larger than humans. Generally, you talk about smaller brains being less involved, but these were, when they were thought to be predecessors of humans, they actually had larger brains, and they had prominent ridges here, and the foreheads kind of went up a little bit. They were first found in the Neander Valley in Germany. That's why they call them Neanderthals. And they were dated a lot more recent than some of the ones we just talked about, like Peking man, between 100,000 and 30,000 BC. And they were first found in Europe and Southwest Asia. And they had pretty much shown that these Neanderthals used tools. They were the first people that we kind of proved buried their dead, which shows a whole bunch of stuff. Animals don't bury their dead. Humans do. Apes don't bury their dead. And a lot of people believe that this indicated they believed in a life after death. They also made clothes from the skins of animals. Here's a Neanderthal skull. And originally we thought they were very primitive, backward cave dwellers. Far less complex than you all. But they did. Homo sapiens used language and developed sophisticated art, whereas Neanderthals didn't. Well, here's a picture of one. The skull, and then we talked about that. They intentionally buried their dead. Here's another picture of one. This is practicing herbal medicine. They think that they practiced herbal medicine. And then in 2006, they were able to check out their DNA. And their DNA was 99.9% identical to humans.
Wow.
Well, if you studied Robert's DNA and my DNA, they're about 99.9% equal. It's not like it's less human because he's 99. It means he is human. So he was a fully human genetically. And you can't really point out anything that Neanderthals did and Homo sapiens didn't do, according to John Shea. And it looks like they interbred. That's National Geographic News from 2010. So here's the supposed characteristics. Or I think we went through these before. But all these changes are probably due to two things: rickets and living to be so old. What would your skull look like if you lived to be 600? Lynn? It looked a little different, I think.
What are rickets?
We'll talk about rickets. That's a great question. First of all, when adults have rickets, they call it osteomalacia, which means soft bones. And osteomalacia and rickets are usually due to not enough vitamin D. Sometimes it's because you can't use it, but usually it's because you don't get any in. They have collagen, okay, but they don't have calcium because you need vitamin D to put calcium in the bone. And when your bones are soft or weak, you have, they get bowed and they get broken. Oh, Steve, come on in. We're talking about osteomalacia. You got that?
All my life.
Hi, Steve.
By the way, when I was about 5, they started putting vitamin D in the milk because of this, okay? Because people weren't getting enough vitamin D. Now, you get vitamin D from, anyway, rickets and osteomalacia is caused by lack. And here's a normal bone, and here's a bone with a bunch of holes in it. It's not very strong. And that causes you overage, bend over, right down right here. It also causes you to get bow-legged. And I brought something. This is a great little article by Greg Beasley. And I printed off one, and I printed off the first 2 pages of a whole bunch of others. You can just put that in, and it'll bring up the article on the internet. I actually printed off the whole thing if someone wants one. So he basically said that all of this was from the Ice Age. Almost all scientists now believe that right after the flood there was an Ice Age. The Bible kind of indicates a little bit God caused a wind to pass over the waters, over the earth, and the water subsided. So had a high wind, and you have all this moisture. It's a perfect thing for an ice age. And if you look at the rocks, it looks like there was an ice age right after the flood. So why rickets? Well, according to this guy, vitamin D comes mainly from exposure to the skin, the sun, okay? And then it comes from your diet, especially fatty fish and eggs. So if it's really cold outside, you don't go out in your shorts and short sleeve shirt. You put on long, heavy clothes and cover up as much as you can. You don't get any sun, basically, because there wasn't much sun to start with. It was Ice Age. But then they've studied the diet of the Neanderthals, and there's no eggs, no fatty fish, no caviar, and we think they definitely had a deficiency of vitamin C. But the other thing about Neanderthals is they were right after the flood. They were living to be old for a few years. So I think that most of these Neanderthals fossils are just people who lived to be, well, look how long people lived after the flood, for a while. Noah, he died when he was 950. So if you picked up Noah's skull, it'd look a lot different than Brian's. Because, and Shem, Noah's son, died in 602, and on down the list, Arpachshad died in 4. So people were living a lot longer. About the time of Abraham and Nahor, his grandpa, they started living close to what we live today. So here's so I found me a picture of an old human skull. And, I just looked it up, I just clicked on it, and somebody had written in there, it looks a lot like a Neanderthal skull. I didn't put that in, I didn't ask for it, so, you got the heavy, it's a thick skull, a little bit of a sloping forehead, with superorbital ridges. Here's a Neanderthal skull. A little bit different, but this one looks a lot like it. And it's only 111 years old. So what do you think it looked like if he was 800 years old and had rickets? And there's a normal human skull and a Neanderthal skull. The skull that I showed you of a 111-year-old man looks as much like this as it does like this. So that's Neanderthal. And the next one, in some people's evolutionary tree or path, is Cro-Magnon. Anybody heard of Cro-Magnon before?
Yes.
Everybody's heard of Neanderthal, right? The Cro-Magnon is the next one. They found that there's a lot of Neanderthaloid characteristics in Cro-Magnons. And my opinion about Cro-Magnon is that these were just younger and maybe not quite as much in the Ice Age, a few years later than the Neanderthals. So if you get to where you're living to be 120 and starting to warm up a little bit, then you wouldn't have as many Neanderthals, but you might have some. Maybe you're living to be 200. And then one interesting thing about Cro-Magnons, they found some young Cro-Magnon skeletons. It's juvenile skeletons. I guess that means they're less than 118, maybe even younger. And here's 3 of them. 2 of them infants and 1 juvenile. Everything's just like humans because they're young and they haven't had change. They haven't lived to be 250 with rickets. So you don't hear much about that when they talk about Cro-Magnon, what the Cro-Magnon infants and juveniles look like. And the teeth of Cro-Magnons look exactly like, probably better than my teeth. So they changed human evolution theory. So now none of these run into man. Those are just, all these fossils, none of them lead to man now. Because you can prove that they don't, right? And they just had somewhere back here an unknown common ancestor. Don't point. So, again, the point I want to make about that is, again, not really to criticize, but when people believe something, you can show them the facts, and they'll pretty much say, don't bother me with the facts. I'm going to believe this thing. So, you can do the same thing today. You can spend years disproving everything that they're saying about human evolution, and would it do any good? It might change a few people's ideas. But there's some people that are scientists. So now they're talking a lot about Homo erectus, which just means man who walks erect. Okay? That's unusual. Apes don't walk erect. They walk like this. Humans walk like this. Now, some of the Neanderthals walk like this because they were bent over from the osteomalacia. We have a lot of people who are bent over today when they're old, but it's usually from osteoporosis, because osteomalacia is pretty easy to treat. Just give like D once in a while. So these are the characteristics of Homo erectus. Well, here's 5 of them they frequently cite as different kinds or species or types of Homo erectus. We already went through Peking man, and I'm not going to go through all these in great depth because they're all humans. They're just people. They found a Java man, and they decided from these fossils that he looked like this, or that. Here's a picture of Yanwu man, which is down in China, and Atlantean man, and Neijing man, also here in China. So this is from Wikipedia. Both the brain size and the presence of Broca's error also support that Homo erectus could articulate language. And they lived in small band societies, similar to modern society. They hunted in coordinated groups, they used complex tools, and they cared for their weak and infirm. It appears that vault thickness cannot be used to distinguish humans from Homo erectus. So they pretty much decided it doesn't work because there's an overlap. And it looks like they interbred also with modern man in Europe and Asia. So Homo erectus, all of them were just humans. Some of them had a thicker skull.
We got plenty of folks on that mind.
I got a pretty thick skull at times. So does Bill. So Lucy was an ape. Homo erectus are humans, and neither one show anything about human evolution. And they're kind of starting to, the scientists that are honest are starting to agree. You point out things, but some of them see that this isn't true, that we evolved from apes, or apes and people evolved from a common ancestor. They don't know how. The fossil record doesn't show it. They keep hoping, well, let's get some more fossils and it'll prove it. Well, they believe it, but there's no proof. They admit that there's no proof, but they still believe it, and they believe they're going to be able to prove it someday. This is interesting. David Pilbeam, who's kind of an expert, said, if you brought in a smart scientist from any other discipline besides human evolution and showed him the meager evidence that we've got to go on, he'd surely say, forget it, there's nothing there. There isn't enough to go on. So,
Well, these are scientists. Why don't they say that to themselves and to each other?
well, they actually are. That's what he's saying here. This is a scientist. He's saying it to each other. He says, there's just not enough evidence to prove that it's true. And yet when you go on Wikipedia or in a science book, it just says this is a fact. It's true. It's true. Now, that's a really good question. We're going to kind of get to that in the next slide or two, okay? There isn't enough there to prove. Okay, this is a guy who's an evolutionist. Modern apes are now nowhere. The same thing's true of modern humans. If we're going to be honest, it's an equally mysterious matter. So I want you to know they believe in human evolution not because of science, but because of religion. It's a faith. In fact, it takes more faith than what we do. You just believe it. And they believed it so long that they're not going to change. It's hard to get to change. This is no fossil or other physical evidence directly connects man to ape. That's in Science Digest a long time ago. We've been flailing about in the dark. We don't have enough data. The theories that we have are more statements about us and our ideology than the past. And that's really answering your question. It's a state, they believe it because of who they are. We believe in evolution. We believe in evolution. We do not believe in creation. And it reveals more about how humans view themselves than it does about how humans came about. That's heresy. Right? That's absolutely unforgivable, but it's true. Here's another one. Fossil evidence, this is by Henry G., of human evolutionary history is fragmentary and open to various interpretations. Fossil evidence of chimpanzee evolution is absent hold together. There's many differences between humans and the most advanced ape. Mainly we walk erect. That's one. We have, because we walk erect, we have different knee joints, different hip joints, different backbone, different toes. We have this opposing thumb, which no primate has, which is useful. You know, pick things up. We use sophisticated tools. Even way back they used tools and they used fire. They had creativity, larger brain, smaller teeth, different shape of the teeth. Can write, paint, make and play musical instruments. But the big one is they communicate by language. I mean, you've heard a parakeet talk, but they're not really communicating. They're just mimicking something they heard somebody say. Now, I think my cat communicates a lot by her eyes and looks. Not near as much as Judy does with her look. I teased Judy about that about 100 times. Maybe I should stop. She had to learn to look when she was a big wig at NOC. Keep people in their place. So she still uses on me at times. The ability to do math. Well, I kind of like math, so I put that one in there. Reason, free will. Now, those things you can't tell from the fossils, but that's a distinct difference between man and apes. There's no good transitional forms, and there's really no proof. So why? Why are they so obstinate? Well, this is pretty much the reason. I don't know that they realize this. This is small print, and I'm sorry. If we evolved from apes and are a product of random cosmic accidents, then man should be able to decide what's right and wrong. Or even if you're going to have right and wrong. The problem is there's no basis for deciding what point of view is right or wrong if each person comes to a different conclusion.
No accountability.
No accountability. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's right. The Bible is the best, by far, place to find what's right and wrong. But if you don't believe in God, you don't believe in the Bible. So from Darwin on, all of these people have clung tenaciously to something that's not true because of this. Relative morality. I set the rules.
They just don't want to be held accountable.
Here's another little thought.
Dr. Walter,
Uh-huh.
if we are just a result of random mutations and that sort of thing, we can't trust the values and the moral, why can we trust anything? I mean, why would even scientific or mathematical thinking be considered valid or safe if it's just chance molecules bumping into each other?
C.S. Lewis said it this way. If I'm a product of chance, random cosmic accidents, and my intellect is, it's so crazy, it could never happen. But if my intellect, if my intellect just happened by accident, why in the world would I trust my intellect? That's basically what you said. You know, C.S. Lewis says it in flowering terms. So I'm just going to run through a few more ideas, okay? Have you noticed that the population has gotten longer in your lifetime? Well, you can kind of plot that out. If man started even 1 million years ago, then this was how many people would be on the earth today. Which is a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's one with 2,000 zeros. More people than a whole bunch more people, you know. See, a billion is 9 zeros, so.
I like the number of stars.
Yeah. If man started 4,000 years ago, you can plot it out. It would be about the number of people there is today. And then I just thought I'd talk about sex and evolution of man.
All right.
I'd talk about sex. If a man evolved, he'd have to find a woman. There'd have to be a woman evolved somewhere on the earth. He'd have to find her, figure out what to do, have all the reproductive organs. She would too. If they had a baby, the baby couldn't die. I mean, it just makes the likelihood less and less and less and less. And then the whole idea, how would sexual reproduction even emerge? You know, it doesn't have any, it doesn't have any evolutionary benefit, right? You won't be more likely than animals that can reproduce otherwise. By the way,
That applied to us, it would apply to every creature on the earth that has two sexes.
and why do you got to do that, by the way? Other than he knew he enjoyed it. Well, he did it because we talked about all these mutations, which we're going to talk a lot about next week. If you have a mutation, okay, you know this, if you breed animals that are in the same family, then they end up with multiple terrible mutations. If you have a mutation in one animal, you want to get another animal to breed with it so they're different, and they have different mutations, and you don't have near, because most mutations are recessive. They're there in the gene, but they don't really affect you because the other gene takes charge. So if you have one over here and one over here, and you mate, then it helps you handle mutations a lot better. So. But why and how is a question that evolutionists cannot answer. So going back to the scriptures, John, would you read for me?
Genesis 1:26-27. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over cattle and all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on earth. God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them.
God made sex, and he created men and female. Here's where the description when he created man, he formed man from the dust of the ground, not from an ape, but from the dust of the ground. He went back to mud and made him, and then he was lying there all made, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and he became a living being. Now that's a lot better way to be made than to think that you came from an amoeba or a grasshopper.
Amen.
Amen.
You were made by God, and he likes you. And he made women too. And she wasn't made from the dust. She was made from a lot better stuff. So God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. He took one of his ribs, closed up the flesh, and fashioned this rib into a woman. From the rib he'd taken from the man, and he brought her to him. The man. John talked about time travel. That's one thing I'd like to go back in time and watch.
Yeah.
I'd like to see Adam look at Eve.
Saw her.
I bet you he was pretty happy. But the other thing you need to remember, I'd like you to remember anyway, you also were created individually by God.
Amen.
God formed your inward parts. He wove you in your mother's womb. I give thanks to you, God, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are God's works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there is not one of them. So, you're wonderfully made. God made you. He didn't make a mistake. He made you just like He wanted you. And you're made in His image. And He loves you dearly, and He proved it at the cross. And He wants you to have the best of everything, and He wants you to live with Him for all eternity.
Amen.
And we didn't come from apes. We didn't come from amoebas, we came from God. And he's a great creator, and we want to honor him and serve him. Let's end with, any other comments? I kind of went through that. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Glad you're here
What
tonight.
are we covering next week?
DNA.
Ah, cool.
Todd's bored by that. He told me he didn't get the standard. I'll make it a little bit interesting. Even got a moving picture.
Oh, it's fascinating. It's
It is,
absolutely
man.
fascinating.
And I don't think anybody's ever really thought through what DNA means about evolution. I thought that maybe it would convince a bunch of scientists that, but it doesn't. They just kind of use it to prove evolution. Prove, in quotation marks. But DNA is fascinating, and we didn't know a lot about it in medical school. They did know some about it, but then we'll get to that next week.
They're using human DNA in manufactured computers
Yeah.
now. One company is to store information, and it stores a phenomenal amount of information.
Yeah, I got a little slide on that. How much information you can get on a DNA on a pinhead. Just,
I was just thinking about the moral evolution, or moral ethical theories. Probably the dominant one today, outside of Christianity, is basically what I call groupthink. It's what the majority of people feel is right and wrong. That becomes the,
and that's the basis of democracy?
well, yeah, but I mean, that's kind of the dominant moral theory today.
I'll go ahead and tell you that on a pinhead, the DNA, top of a pinhead, and you printed that off into books, you could go to the moon and back 300 times. The books, just stack the books up. That's a lot of information. That's just one
I wouldn't
illustration.
doubt that at all.
It's just an illustration. You get into bytes and figures and it blows our mind. DNA is really fascinating.
But have they solved the problem? How many angels can fit on the planet that has a thing?
I haven't been able to ask my
I think
angel.
they have to
lately.
be dancing angels.
That's different. That's a different question.
You talked about recessive. That's the problem that happens like with first cousins, married first cousins.
Yeah.
In the Arab world, in the Muslim world, about 1/3 are married to first or second cousins. They don't get outside their family. And that's could explain a lot of problems there are with Muslims.
Let's end with a prayer. Let's see. Steve, would you end us with a prayer, please?
Our Father in heaven, we're so grateful for Ron, we're grateful for the time he takes to really enlighten us on what you created. We're so thankful for our time together, our fellowship, the love we have for one another. Keep us in your abundant, safe arms for the rest of our lives. We pray these things in his name.
Amen.